Amen. Well, February is the month where people start to think about romance. And today at Rivertown Church, we are walking through a new series called The Vow. Can somebody say The Vow? The Vow. Sounds like ominous, right? Exciting, powerful. You know, when ladies dream of getting married, what are some things, ladies, you dream of when you dream of getting married? The dress, what else? The groom. Did somebody say the groom? Like there could be a groom. Like I was hoping I showed up. Like groom Uber, just can he get there? So what about I remember for me and Melanie, it was like, what are we going to spend the most money on? The flowers or the cake or the dress? And unless you have a multi-millionaire parent somewhere, you got to pick one. Pick one. And so it's the perfect marriage, the perfect wedding. How about this, the perfect house? Ladies, give me my house. What the kids are going to be named, right? I've talked to enough guys, and they're just thinking how many times a day can we do what married people do? How many times a day? How many times a day? So raise your hand here today if you've ever had any part of your life ever touched by divorce, by a vow that didn't work out. Yeah, people have. Some of you don't have your hands raised. I know you've known somebody, right? Well, most of our families have. And you ever seen when people drive away from the wedding reception, and what do they write with the shaving cream on the back window of the car? Just married. And then somebody says 20 years later, they say, we're just married. But the vow's got to be so much more than just married, right? The vow has got to be a doorway into something that God created. And if people are holding on today, if you're here today and you're holding on to just married, or you're worried about you'll get married because the vow has caused you pain in the past, or the vow has been something that has kind of been a noose around your neck, or you've had so much pain in your family, or you've been to the altar before and you're not going again, but you still got a man, or you still got a woman, or you visit, at this point you're thinking about how many times has my grandparents been married? It's the vow can be a big thing. And so today, I want to be able to say that the vow that God has for us, there is something in it that changes who we are in a way that if both people submit themselves to the vow, how many does it take to tango? Yeah. If both people submit themselves to the vow, the power and the glory and the blessing of marriage is still possible. It's still possible. A few years ago, I noticed in my premarital counseling I did with couples that we would talk about all the things you talk about in premarital counseling, and then I'd realize that they have never seen the vow. One couple, we got to the altar, and after the wedding, I thought to myself, I just led them in this vow, and they've never seen a vow. I'm saying, will you take, and literally they don't even know the vow. I'm saying it, they're just repeating what I'm saying. The vow. Well, today, when we talk about this whole message series on the vow, I want to go back to the very beginning, Genesis 2:24. It says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. And that leave father and mother is so much more than move out of the house. So much more, right? It's so much more than move out of the house. It's cut the strings. Don't go back. You are now your own unit, and they aren't part of it. And that's for husband and wife. You can't be one flesh with somebody and their family, right? So leave his father and mother, be united with his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This word leaves, and the root in Hebrew is the word azav. It means to loosen or relinquish. Now, the word family, I don't want you to just think about my mom or my dad. I don't think about that. I want you to think about everything that's ever come into your life from the beginning to the time you were born until the time you say your vow. All of that is your family. And the Old King James says it's so interesting. It rhymes. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave. Leave and cleave. Like those cloves. You ever think about you ever see garlic? You know, it comes in a what? Clove. In order to, you have to open it up and separate the clove. That word cleave. Leave and cleave. And then the Bible talks about it again 2 more times, this idea of one flesh and leaving and cleaving. Matthew 19, the Pharisees are asking Jesus a question. If you ever want to start an argument, a religious argument, just ask the question, should somebody get divorced or not? And here they are. They're asking Jesus this question. They're trying to trip him up and trying to start a religious debate. And Jesus cuts through all the garbage that they had at that time. Because it's not like they had these, $500 quickie divorce, hanging out over Galilee somewhere. There wasn't the lawyer, trying to make it happen. It wasn't any of that. It was, they actually had a law that if you said, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you 3 times, the man to the woman couldn't do it, but the man could only do it. I guess she could run away and leave if she could somehow get away to another country, but only if he could say to her, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, then she was done. Over any accusation. Think about the justice and the lack of love and the poor quality of life that produced in that society. And Jesus is trying to speak into that. And of course, some people said that was right. Some people said that was wrong. Some people said it's right, it's wrong. Christianity is always opposite of the marriage culture around it. And so Jesus says to them, they ask, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Let's start the marriage fight about marriage. And Jesus opts out of the argument. And he says, haven't you read? Poke somebody next to you and say, haven't you read? If somebody wants to give their opinion about marriage or the vow, you just want to say haven't you read? I'm out of here. Haven't you read? Haven't you read? He replied. And he goes back to the beginning. At the beginning, there was a creator. Made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the 2 will become one flesh. So they are no longer 2, but 1. It's so tempting in modern society because of all the alternate forms of marriage and the way it's being recrafted to not even go back to the original design. But you know what? That's exactly what they were saying to Jesus, and Jesus went back to the original design again. If you ever want to know how something should function, you go to the person who invented it. So, 2 shall become 1. He says, therefore what God has joined together, let not man separate. The vow is based on this, on one flesh. The 2 people can become 1, and they're not even able to be separated and have 2 wholes ever again. The reason for God's stance against divorce is not that you shouldn't be able to get away from something abusive. It's that when you break apart, it often breaks you personally into pieces. And God's love for us is healing, not brokenness. But what happens with the cup, and I want to talk about these vows for just a minute. Over this month, we're going to talk about vows. And today the vow is the vow of priority in the 4 vows. And there'll be 3 more that we talk about in the course of the month. Next week, Pastor Casey is going to talk about the vow of pursuit. I'm going to be back talking about the vow of partnership on the Sunday after the marriage retreat coming up. And there's 1 more spot left for that if anybody feels like God wants him to be there for that. The vow of partnership. And the last Sunday of the month, Pastor Matt's going to talk about the vow of purity. But all those 4, priority, pursuit, partnership, and purity, are all found in the marriage vows. But it is not the idea of just married and holding on that makes a powerful marriage. You think about it this way. You think, anybody ever kind of fell from something? Like, I've never been a stunt man, but I've always dreamed, like, could I be a stunt man? You know, you're growing up, and anybody with me back in the 80s, like, I'm the unknown stunt man that makes Eastwood look so cool. Anybody remember Colt Seavers, the stunt man? Nick at Night, anybody? No takers? Oh, man. It was the coolest TV show. He had the best truck. Does somebody remember the truck? It was the coolest truck. Are you with me, Dave? Ah, man, Dave, we're there, man. Man, when he went over the side and he grabbed somebody like this, and they're dangling from the helicopter, right? Dangling from the helicopter. That's the idea that God says the vow should be so strong that it catches you if you try some marital stunts and dangle from the helicopter 20 stories up. But you're supposed to be pulled back in and not dangled. But people live a long time just dangled by the vow, right? Dangled by the vow. But the vow doesn't save you. The vow just keeps you from the splat. What saves you? What saves you? There is an idea what you leave and cleave. That idea of a vow that keeps me there is what keeps me from leaving. But what makes me cleave? Right? What makes me cleave? Where's the beauty? I want to talk today about the things to leave that keep us from being able to have a full cup to offer somebody else. Today, this idea of an emotional capacity that your cup runs over. And I want you to see this today. And it's on our notes. If you want to go on our website, you can see it there. It'll probably be posted on our social media. But this is a great, great image. I got this from probably the first marriage seminar we ever went to. It was amazing. And I just remember this. And I pulled this out. It was like an ancient document I pulled out of my files this week. I was like, this is so good. This explains so much. But do you see those positive emotions at the top? See those positive emotions? Man, you're sitting there and they're getting married and just all you got is the positive emotions. But how much does it take to push that top layer out? I mean, the guy was talking about what kind of coffee she liked, but what would it take to get the whip out of this cup? Not a lot. Like, how much stress would push the positive out? Not much. How much anxiety would put the positive out? How much fear, how much false guilt, how much bitterness, resentment, how much would it take? Can I get a witness? Things happen. And what we end up with is something that sometimes people can't hold on to. Right? And we think, well, why aren't you holding on to me? I can't hold on to everyday stress, everyday anxiety, everyday fear, everyday false guilt, everyday bitterness, everyday resentment. I can't hold on to that. I'm trying to hold on to that. I'm trying to date that. I'm trying to marry that. I mean, I look so good on the outside. But what's inside me? Like, once you live with me, right? And what happens many times, it's not what happens once you're married, it's what I brought into what was in my cup. And the whole idea that when I have these things, it pushes out what somebody can be happily married to. Deal with these things in your cup and stop trying to deal with the things in their cup. Not their cup. Like, get them used to drinking clean, pure water, and maybe they'll want to have some of their own, right? I can't control, right? Have anybody here ever been able to control somebody that they loved? Has anybody here ever tried? Anybody ever brought somebody to church trying to fix them? Anybody here ever gone home and said, like, man, you should have heard that today? Yeah? you might as well just set yourself back months and months in the relationship when you say that, especially to a man. His mama's been telling him what to do since the time he was born, and he's done with that. Right? Right, guys? He's done with that. Show me the love. And the same way the other way around, right? Show her the love. You know, what do they say in that old movie with, show me the money? But all that's in yellow, that's the money of marriage. Show me the love. Don't try to extract it from me. But boy, have I done it wrong. Anybody else? Man, I have been all those things and accused somebody else of being all those things. I felt the stress inside of me and accused somebody else of being the stress. I felt the guilt inside of me and accused somebody else of it. James chapter 1. We read James chapter 1. Talks about trials and growing through trials and all those things. Then later in James chapter 1 it says, the one who reads the word but doesn't do it is like somebody who looked at themselves in the mirror and then walked away and forgot what they looked like. Guys, men here today, if we're real honest, our families get a whole lot of that blue-purple stuff, don't they? And I've got to come to God and I've got to say, God, make me a cool drink of water. Make me taste good. Because just married, it's not like, you remember the old song that the kids used to do, you know, on the playground? Casey talked about the playground. Take the key and lock her up. Lock him up. Lock her up. Take the key and lock her up. My fair lady. We get locked up, right? The good thing about the vow is this. Once you get locked up, it's change or die. Right? It's be altered by God's altar. It's change or die. I've got to deal with it or it'll never get dealt with. Let's move on. The principle today is this. Big principle is this. God is your one and your spouse is your two. Here's where we get it backwards. We very often, man, my house has done it before, get so confused because we somehow treat the other person like they should be able to deal with and clean up all that's in my cup. And only God can do that. And if he's not one, God doesn't come, he's not Lord at all in my cup unless he's Lord over all in my cup. God's my one and my spouse is my two. But many times we start expecting the spouse to provide the needs that only God can do. Can your spouse do anything about all that stuff in our cups? No. But we're right there sometimes. Take the key and lock her up. Fix it, baby. Fix it, sir. Fix all this inside of me. That's when we get the one and the two so backwards. And you know how many divorces you can get with the one and the two backwards? As many as you want. As many as you want. Or now you can just go through person pretending to, like, they're not people now where they don't pretend to be married. They're just together so long they're pretending to not be married. That makes sense? And living like this, lock her up, or living like that without the vow, it ends up all the same because the cup beats the vow eventually. Haven't you seen it? The cup eventually beats the vow if the cup doesn't stay cleaned. So if you're today and you're hoping to get married, you'll be able to say it this way. I will seek the one while preparing for my two. And once I get my two, I won't stop seeking the one. Because we're so guilty of get her, get him, then go right back to my cup the way it was. And that's, the cup is the reason why people say, well, you weren't like this when we got married. I cleaned my cup first, and I hadn't cleaned it since. And so I've got to say it this way. I vow that God will be my first priority, and my spouse will be my second priority. You will know, men and women, what kind of Christian you are the day your spouse says, I ain't going. You don't fight with them. You don't cajole them. You just say, I pray for you. I love you. I'm going to seek God for us. I vow that God will be my first, the vow of priority. Because we can talk today about how important date nights are, and I'd like to talk to you about that. I can talk to you today about how important, cutting the cord with parents are, and I'd like to talk to you about that. I can talk to you today about finances and how that's a hard thing in marriage, and I'd like to talk to you about that. But there is not an amount of perfection in those other things that fixes a dirty cup. And so, today as we close, I want you to see a video from a young lady who came here as a military spouse years ago. She and her husband came in not really long after they'd been married. And she has a story to tell. In her home team, in her new church back in Kansas where they moved to, they wrote out their testimonies. Everybody was encouraged to write out their testimony. And she said she was so excited to email it to me so that I could have it. I said, would you please make a video? It's so on time and it's so on point. And I know that women have experienced the emotional breaking of the vow like she talks about. I've seen it again and again, but I've never seen one confess it like this. One time I found a cup, a clear cup that I had some tea in one time, but it had been left outside on the back porch, some little out of the way place, and because it was open and left unattended, some leaves fell into it, some dirt got into it. I think one of the kids threw something in it, and after about 3 or 4 years, I found it. Fungus, dirt, every awful thing. And you know what I did with it? I threw it away. It's a nice glass cup. I just threw it away. But I was listening to Alyssa today. I was thinking, I sure am glad they didn't throw it away. And today, I want to ask God to just come amongst our midst today. Do you see how this applies? You don't have to be married or single or whatever, wherever you are. It's that can God get down to the bottom of my cup? Because I look at it sometimes and I think, God, nobody can clean this, right? There's no amount of scrubbing could fix this, God. It can't happen. So every once in a while, they're just gonna have to feel my bitterness. They have to feel my anger. They have to feel my hurt and resentment, God. They're gonna deal with my guilt, God. And to me, it seems easy until I have to deal with somebody else's, right? And those things are the things that eventually kill the vow of priority with God. And so could we as a church family over this next month and year just say, God, cleanse my cup, Lord. I don't think you can do it, God. You might have to throw me away. But God, I took my marriage to the altar once. Or maybe you're here today and you're really afraid to go to the altar. But you go not to the marriage altar, but to the altar that cleanses the cup first. If you're married, before you deal with the other person, let's spend some time saying, God, deal with me. If you're not married, don't you dare get married to somebody who the bottom of their cup has never been touched in 3, 4, 5, 10 years. It's only people who are willing to address themselves who will ever be safe in a vow. Anybody hear me on that? And so today, can we just stand up today? As the band leads us in this song, can you just say, God, as the band leads us in this song, say, God, and would you just put the cup back up on the screen? Say, would you lead us in this song? Could you just say, God, deal with me. Deal with me. Deal with me, God. Deal with me. Let me be something clean to drink, joyful to drink, romantic to drink, attractive to drink, God. Let me be that.